Requiem and the Fifth Gate. Chapter 1. The Abyss. Requiem stood at the edge of the end of the world. Before him, a vast and dizzying abyss twinkled peacefully at the centre of a dirty tornado. His best friend, Gio, looked on from a few feet behind. As lightning razed what little ground was left, he wondered what had compelled Requiem to implode the peaceful fishing village this time. Feeling Gio's quizzical gaze upon him, Requiem sighed heavily. "The Hafuna are odd," he declared. "I sat in the Royal Albert Hall for a night of civilised classical music, surrounded by thousands of people, all of whom appeared to be normal. How wrong can one be?" Gio walked up to stand by Requiem's side, contemplating the latest consequences of his friend's ire. "So, how did you come to this profound conclusion about the Hafuna whilst watching a classical music concert?" Requiem did not turn to speak to Gio. Instead, he plunged his hands into his pockets, looked up and sighed. "For a while, the two seats in front of me were empty, and I had a great view. The music was entrancing, and all was well with the world." He kicked a few stones over the edge of the abyss. "Then Rocky started. He was sitting to the right of my perfect view. I tried to look dead ahead, concentrate on the orchestra, the conductor, anything. But he seemed determined to snatch tranquility out of the corner of my eye and wave it about until he had my full and undivided attention. Evidently, he just had to wave his hands around like a lunatic to the beat of the music. Except that it wasn't to the beat at all. Not that the orchestra looked like they were taking the blindest bit of notice of the conductor, but thank the gods they weren't paying attention to this guy." Now in possession of the facts, Gio considered the odds. Japanese in origin, with his heart firmly in sumo, Gio was the size of a small mountain, but with the peaceable and diplomatic bent of his Northgate brethren. All too often it seemed to be down to he, Gio, to calm the beast within Requiem and allow the Hafuna, the non-Akatsuki humans of the world, to live another day. He hoped that today wasn't the day his luck ran out. He asked gently, "So from someone acting like a wannabe conductor, you condemn all Hafuna as mad?" "You don't understand," Requiem shouted, leaning ever closer to the abyss. "When you're trying to relax and soak up the atmosphere, and all you can see out of the corner of your eye is a jiggling idiot, it is simply infuriating. At one point I thought we were saved as the woman next to him grabbed his hands, but no, she just bobbed along with him. In the end I could see nothing but these bobbing hands and feel nothing but building rage." With one eye on the gaping abyss before him, Gio put a mighty arm around Requiem's well-proportioned but decidedly smaller shoulders and spoke calmly. "Still, that's just two people, right? Not enough to annihilate a whole race." In response to this woeful lack of understanding, Requiem flung his hands and head up in the air. "Perhaps, but then some way through the first half the two seats in front of me filled with either relatives or friends of Rocky. In the end, I had 4 people in front of me, all trying to conduct a different tune, all looking like they were swatting flies, all moving their heads with the deliberate intention of blocking my view. I'm telling you, it was a conspiracy." Gio looked Requiem squarely in the eye and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "But it still isn't enough to condemn a race." Staring vacantly into the abyss, Requiem spoke softly. "True." Then suddenly he rounded on Gio, a wild look in his eyes, catching Gio off guard as he waved his finger at him and proclaimed, "But then the flags came out!" "Flags?" said Gio despairingly, his massive fingers now massaging his temples. He wondered how he was going to get out of this one, how everyone was going to get out of this one. Requiem seemed buoyant, almost excited as he explained, "Yup. For one song, I forget its name, perhaps Rule Britannia, the thousands of apparently sane people joined Rocky, spontaneously flinging flags up in the air and waving them incoherently, even dangerously. Requiem sighed heavily as if all the excitement had left his body, before mustering a deep breath to continue impressing his point, albeit in an increasingly high-pitched voice. People even brought their own flags along. Well-dressed, imperialist-looking old men shot up out of their seats and waved St. George's. I'm sure they even had tears in their eyes as they sang, "Britannia rules the waves. It's people like that who start wars." Abruptly, Requiem halted his tirade and let the anger ebb away as he put his hands back in his pockets to continue more thoughtfully. The music ended, the crowd applauded their own insanity, and all returned to normal, apart from Rocky and his fellow bobbing, weaving, air-punching geriatrics. I mean, what causes people to do that? They all look so normal. But then, afterwards, throngs of people were mourning their torn flags. By now, Gio and Requiem were teetering at the very edge of the abyss, their clothes flapping wildly in the hurtling wind, stares fixed down. How, wondered Gio, had it come to this again? Requiem was more powerful than any Akatsuki outside of the council, but his raw power was accompanied by a dangerously volatile nature, one that the council would not tolerate forever. Choosing his words carefully, Gio tried once more to get Requiem to see reason. I can see why the sight of thousands of people abandoning behavioural etiquette might rankle, but why not let the imperialists have their moment? Their time has gone, and the next generation isn't half as arrogant. A flash of light from within the abyss prompted Gio to pull Requiem back from the edge. I know you've had a shocking reminder of what it is to be human, but the Hafuna are not that bad. They're us, remember? Just less evolved in terms of ability and, perhaps, civility. We shouldn't judge them so harshly. Just as Gio was considering drastic action, the tension in Requiem's body was released. Slouching, he pulled away from Gio's embrace. "You're right," he said reluctantly. Slowly, he pulled a hand out of his pocket and held it over the abyss with his fingers spread apart. His hand rose and fell with the undulating wind as if it were riding the waves of an unsettled ocean. Suddenly, his platinum pocket watch flew out of his waistcoat pocket, yearning to join the abyss. The rocky ground beneath his feet was turning rapidly to dust, the rock slithering like a red mist towards the edge where it was caught by the diving wind, blurring into white as it hurtled into the abyss's darkness. This darkness was littered with stars, all alive for an instant before fading to black and out of existence. Lost in thought, Requiem reflected on the beauty before him, but sadly, this was no scenic retreat. The howl of the tornado around them was like a siren, calling everything to join it in the abyss's embrace. What once were trees, houses, and all manner of earthly wonders were now just molecules on a mission to join the finale of the abyss. The stars, so beautiful but so short-lived, were fading as if in a poetic confession of their dark secret. That this was the last of the matter, the earth itself, its people, their belongings, clumping together and turning into energy. But it wasn't too late. Requiem could still pull everyone back from the brink. All he had to do was to want it, to want to save the Hafuna he found so uncouth and ill-disciplined, so blind to what they had. Requiem knew Gio was right. He always made a strange kind of sense. Total annihilation was no way to teach a lesson. After all, who would be left to understand it? In frustration at his helplessness to do anything about the human condition of the Hafuna, coupled with annoyance over his rash act, Requiem gritted his teeth, closed his eyes and clenched his fist. As he lowered his hand, he opened his eyes and turned away, feeling as though he had lost another battle to Hafuna kind. The dusty rock-strewn ground gave way to lush green grass, littered with blue honeysuckles. The tornado lifted to reveal rolling hills and a calm, cloudy summer sky. No longer littered by stars of an inescapable end, the darkness of the abyss filled with soft, undulating water. Small fishing boats bobbing in its calm currents. The faint but soothing ringing of their bells filled the silence as Requiem walked away. Gio watched the boats swaying in the gentle wind and breathed in the sweet smell of success. Requiem's honeysuckles, his signature apology for almost ending the world. Scratching his head, he muttered wryly, "At least it wasn't as bad as when he last went to the cinema." Wiping his brow with his bandana, Gio released a huge sigh of relief. Gio turned around and opened his mouth to speak, but, by now, Requiem was just a figure on the horizon. Gio began bounding towards him, whilst humming triumphantly to himself. The only thing preventing the ground from trembling was the thick, lush green grass, cushioning Gio's great sandaled feet as he trampled the unique honeysuckles Requiem had gifted. The hill they were on was tall and steep, offering a heartwarming view of the restored world. Far below them, a village made of tiny white cottages and cobbled streets carried out its day just like any other. As far as the Hafuna populating it were concerned, it was a day just like any other. They would have no recollection of Requiem's near apocalypse. Lost in thought, Requiem continued to trudge down the steep decline with both hands in his pockets. He barely noticed as the sun slipped out from behind white fluffy clouds until his eyes could no longer stare into space and he squinted. Reluctantly, he pulled a hand out of his pocket and held it up as if in a salute to the sun. Slowly, the glory of the day seeped into his heart. But something was stopping him from fully appreciating this small wonder. The ground was undulating like waves reaching shore, and he could hear something. Something out of tune. Something badly sung, something annoying. He didn't need to look back to realise that Gio was leaping from one foot to the other as he followed. Gio's humming merged intermittently with words as he quickly lost the composure Requiem thought all should have. Requiem kept a stiff upper lip this time, and clenched his fist as if to catch the sun's rays. As he moved his hand in an arc, a flat square, as tall as a house and burning with the brilliance of the sun, appeared before him. The square remained suspended just off the apex of the hill, floating in mid-air whilst letting off an ominous hum. Requiem strode forward, and instead of following the decline of the hill, he entered the brilliant square and disappeared. At the sight of this, Gio stretched out an arm and shouted in a voice tinged with panic, "Hey, wait for me!" Leaning forward, Gio ran after Requiem and dived headlong into the square. The deep humming ceased as the brilliant square faded. The sun retreated behind the clouds, and the valley carried on with its peaceful morning, blissfully unaware that it had been sucking the world in on itself only moments earlier.